Just ahead, the space industry is booming again. Are other Brevard businesses cashing in? What's missing in education today? We ask a retired judge who spent years straightening out young people. And Brevard cities say their hands are tied in attempts to restrict short-term vacation rentals. We go one-on-one with a beachside mayor who explains. This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union for making today's program possible. My guests today are retired Judge A.B. Majeed. Besides his years on the bench in county court, Judge Majeed is speaking on patriotism and just addressed a crowd at Florida Tech about the First Amendment. Also joining us is Jennifer Sugarman. She is president and CEO of the Cocoa Beach Regional Chamber of Commerce. Her group just finished a blitz of visits to more than 900 businesses in Brevard County. So great to have you both in the studio. We have a judge and we have a chamber CEO, very plugged into business. So let's bring up a topic that is the namesake for this whole area, and that is space. There are so many interesting things going on. We've got Blue Origin testing new engines. We have SpaceX promising missions to the moon and Mars. There are other types of companies, Boeing, Lockheed, that are involved in new ways developing space capsules. There seems to be a big resurgence of space in this area, only different. And I think the question is, one, are businesses catching on to this and also cashing in? And number two, what do we as Americans to make of this? Is it as patriotic an endeavor as, say, the shuttle missions or the Apollo missions? Let's start with Jennifer about the business angle here.
Yeah, so great question, by the way. And I was fortunate enough to move down in 2010, summer of 2010. So I actually got to see one of the last flights of Discovery. So when you talk about patriotism, I cried my eyes out when I saw that flight, and I got to see it from, the bleachers right there. So it was very patriotic and something I never felt before. In Atlanta, where I'm from, you don't see rockets going up once a week or twice, a month, however many we have going up. I know that we have a very aggressive launch manifest for this coming year. But in terms of patriotism, seeing a rocket go up, whether there's humans on it or not, it doesn't get lost on me. And I don't think it gets lost on the people that live here. I watch it from my driveway. And to get used to something like that, I think would be really hard to do. But from the business angle, yes, of course, all of our businesses on the Space Coast, when space industry is doing well, which is such a large chunk of what we do, all the businesses are doing well. I have Boeing and Lockheed on our chamber board, and they talk nonstop about what's coming. And so it does look a little different than it used to, but it's exciting because it's new. There's more free competition, I think, less than federal budget coming in, which is good and bad depending on how you look at it. But businesses are excited. They're invigorated, right down to our little restaurants that, I don't know if you saw, Bar Rescue is coming next year, I think is when it airs. King's Duck Inn was revamped, and now it looks like you're in a rocket ship. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that, and it was just, and they're up there close to Titusville, and it's just, the whole community is really rallying around space, whether you're in the space industry or not. They play a part, and so absolutely, it looks different, but everyone's still excited, and, some of our smaller manufacturers, I think, were affected by the retirement of the shuttle program, but what the Space Coast understands that not all of the country understands is that NASA's not closed. Kennedy Space Center is not closed. We still send things up into space, which is really remarkable.
Judge Majeed, do you think that we take for granted as Americans the kind of space activity that's going on in this county?
Well, I think we do take a lot of things for granted as American, and I was just thinking, when this space program started, when the first flight went up, I was not even in this country. I was still at home in Guyana, South America, and I read about it. I read about the Russians going up with their dog Laika. I remember that very, 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 very well when the dog went up. And then when the space program started, I think it started in '68, the first flight went up, and I was still in Guyana at that time. I came to this country late in 1969. But the remarkable thing is that now space, we always use the word enterprise, it now really is a free enterprise process. It is a commercial process. It's not going to be privatized, and I think it's going to boom more than it's ever boomed because I have a great respect for the government, but America is about independence, not dependence. And if government is doing something, it's dependence. And now that space is privatized. I think you're going to see a whole new aspect of space. It's going to boom. We realize that space is a place we can colonize. And believe me, I am absolutely certain that in our lifetime, we were just talking about your wonderful kids, when our grandchildren are saying, I'm going home for Thanksgiving, they're going to go to some planet other than Earth for Thanksgiving.
Well, I'm going to be here, and I'm hoping they're going to come back here. Maybe
He sounds
Mars
like he's
one
already
time.
signed up for this ticket.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, right now, some of the biggest work with the commercial crew, commercial cargo missions to the International Space Station, those are government contracts, but you're seeing these private companies competing for the contracts to begin with, and then using their technology to venture out into other types of space industry. And I think that's pretty interesting. Jennifer, one of the areas that I know has yet to develop on the Space Coast is that supply chain. That you have the big main companies, but there still needs to be those other people who do, I don't know, they machine, they weld, they do.
Make some sort of a widget that goes on a wall.
They make some sort of widget that goes onto
get
a.
it, yeah.
Where on the timeline are we with that? Do you suppose?
I mean, when you're talking environment, from what we feel like, maybe 50%. I mean, there's so much more that could be untapped with that. And I do not claim to be a space expert, and I'm not even a business expert. I'm around a lot of businesses, I'm around a lot of different things, but especially for our chamber, we definitely focus on space. We're right next to the port. We have a focus on military and tourism and hospitality. So when you talk supply chain, I mean, overall, I think that all of our industries could be pulling in more things that could help across the board. It's not just space, but for space, absolutely, and I think back to your point about everyone kind of running the gamut, Boeing, Lockheed, there's different focuses too, right, which is really exciting. So you have deep space, you have, are we going to an asteroid, are we going to Mars, what's our specialty, what's the capsule going to do, what is it made for? So I think if you look at all the different companies, I mean, just even using my own father as an example, so he works for Unison, which is the division of GE up in Jacksonville. And I had no idea. He came down with his boss for a launch, and they were there because they made a part that was on the rocket. And I had no idea they're an aviation company and not aerospace. So I had no idea that they even made anything tied to it. But that's all the little things that trickle into different parts. And I'm not sure how much of that we have here. So for instance, Jacksonville, they make a little part that goes on the rocket. There's a lot here, but I don't know how much more we could really get here for the supply chain. I don't claim to be an expert on it, but I think that we're headed in the right direction, but we're not at max capacity, if that makes sense.
It could happen pretty much anywhere these days.
Anywhere.
It would be nice if it happened here, and I think the thing that I hope for as a person with a son who's in engineering school, I would love him to come back here and invent that little widget.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
there's great opportunity to be an entrepreneur in Brevard County, get plugged in.
Well, there's a lot of agencies across the county that are working hard to make sure that they come back here.
Yes.
Whether it's economic development or career source or anything else. I mean, there's programs all across the county that are really trying to capture the talent that we produce, have them come right back here and help work on the things that we specialize in. So I think we're on our way, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yes, I think that we would attract a lot of the industries here, because this is a wonderful environment, and I think the politicians are very sensitive to what it takes to attract business here. The governor, the cities, the counties, etc. Everyone's working to attract the business. We also have a fine school in FIT, and we produce great intellectual people. I think the whole concept of the shuttle and the rocket ship is changing. I remember when we had a lot of issues with exactly how about the tile. Remember when the tile was not
right.
the heat resistant that it's supposed to be? And in fact, when Columbia blew up, they believe it had something to do with the tiles and their heat resistance or how they're attached, etc. But now the technology is so far advanced that it's gone way beyond those possibilities. And I think you're going to see a growth in the related industry, space-related industry in this community. I think this is a community industry-friendly community, and I think it's going to take off.
Okay, but now you said a moment ago, it doesn't matter if there's somebody on that rocket or not, but come on. Isn't it just a little bit more exciting when you know there are human beings strapped into
risk.
that?
There's more risk. So I feel like you're a little nervous,
It's the suspense.
Well, it's very
It's
exciting.
not your $1 billion going up and blowing up when it's a rocket, but when there's a person tied to it, everybody feels that. So
Yeah, well, it's very exciting when there's a person because we need someone to speak to the Martians.
Right. Soon.
In our language.
Someday soon.
Yeah.
Someday soon. All right, let's move on to the topic of education here. You both get around, talk to lots of different people, whether you're public speaking or you were in courts or you were out with the businesses. What is the biggest concern that you hear in your community or in your rounds about schools or education here in Brevard County? Judge, let's start with you.
Well, there's always an issue about resources, and as a topical issue now is that teachers are not being paid well enough, and then we had the issue about Common Core, where you need one common curriculum for everybody. Education is a very, very controversial topic because like we had the big debate here, not so long ago, we need to remove certain books and certain portions of books, etc. So there's lots of input to the school board and to the superintendent. But I think by we're doing very well with the system. There is a lot of complaints now, or a lot of talk about liberal, Democrats, conservative, etc., and the nature of the books and the substance of the books that the students are studying. But I have an abiding faith that the pendulum swings. When it comes to education, it swings. And eventually in America and in our education system, it reaches the center again. And we have produced wonderful intellectual groups. And look at the people who are getting the Nobel Prize in economics, etc. Look at what's happening in Silicon Valley. I mean, we've always been in the forefront of technology and education. And I think we'll continue to be that way, better than ever before.
You pointed to a little bit of a paradox there. On one hand, in Florida, there's not this great history of prizing public education or putting a lot of resources into it compared to other states. On the other hand, when it comes time to the content and the lessons that we want students to learn, when it comes to politics, whoa, all of a sudden it's very, very important because what are we teaching our kids?
Yes, but Florida has always been that way. We've always been one of those states. Keep in mind, less than 50 years ago, a black person could not attend University of Florida, could not be a sworn attorney in the state of Florida. And 2 years ago, we had a black person who was a graduate of University of Florida Law School, who was president of the Florida Bar. So we've come a long way. In spite of where we were, the pendulum has swung to the center. Just think about that. How far we've come in terms of educating people and producing fine people of the highest intellect.
Yeah, we went from, in the 1950s, the legislature actually voting to close the public school system rather than reintegrate or integrate. To, in recent years, at least in Education Week rankings, getting up there to the top 10, 15 or so states. Not bad. It just shows that things have, maybe the pendulum's coming the other
listen,
way.
we have West Shore right here in Brevard County, which one of the top high schools in the nation. It's done the Reb School in Merritt Island, top high school in the nation, and
what's
FITs,
nice is that
top
all of our
schools.
schools are
Yes.
very high rated, which is, partly why we bought our house where we did. So it's a great school system.
A lot of A-rated schools here in Brevard County. Schools have moved up from C-rated to A-rated this year. So I think the future is good, and we have bright students. We have bright kids in this community. They're so technologically advanced. If I did not have my 10-year-old or my 15-year-old, I probably wouldn't be able to put on my television. You should buy them and plug them in, but you can't do that no more.
Right. Jennifer Sugarman, small business people complain about everything, it seems like sometimes. They're pretty skeptical people,
All of our businesses are amazing and we love them. No complaints.
I don't know. I'm just, I'm going on survey results of small business. They seem to be the most skeptical people sometimes. In the business community, what do you hear?
And I'll tell you why that is. It's because they put their heart and soul, everything they've got into these businesses, into their livelihood, into making it work for their family. So I get it. There's a lot that could go wrong, and they need things to go right, and so there's a lot of moving parts that are involved in that. But in terms of your actual question and what I hear, I have a leg up on this just because I just came from lunch with Dr. Blackburn and some of our tourism and business officials, and I got to hear their questions, whether they were a parent or not. And I think a lot of concern is, Common Core was kind of what the concern was. But I think a lot of them, I actually got one of these questions today. Dr. Blackburn got one of them as he was trying to eat a salad, poor guy. He got the question of, are we really giving out participation trophies? Are we not teaching kids how to write a check? Are we not teaching kids what finances meaning? So it's all these huge questions that add up of vocational schools, how to write a check, are they able to write cursive, can they do this or that, do they know how to win and lose gracefully? So it's all these kind of outlier questions that I think start in school but end in the home. So that's always a challenge, and certainly I don't envy, the school system for where you draw that line, but I think that's part of what I'm hearing. And then for me personally as a new mom, what I'm looking at is security. So, just in my hometown in a suburb of Atlanta, there was a bomb found in a teenager's room. Some threats were made and they took it seriously and investigated, and an attack was planned. And as a new mom, that's something that really scares me for my son entering the school system, because it's everywhere. It could be here, it could be anywhere. So that's not so much education, but protecting education. So it's all these new problems that you didn't used to have to worry about as much that are now taking on a new face. It's very scary.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to go to high school post Columbine.
No.
We didn't worry. I went to high school in the San Francisco Bay Area. We worried about earthquakes.
Yeah.
If there was a gun problem, it was with the gang members in town, but you never thought about it coming onto campus that way.
And I was sort of in that realm when I went through high school, so it was different, I'm certain, than the experience that my previous high school fellow classmates went through. But it's an interesting time for sure. You're not safe anywhere, I feel like.
I think the problem with small business, I don't want to use the term problem, but there's a conflict between the municipalities, the counties, and the state. Now, state legislatures have their own interest, get reelected, etc. Now, for example, if they give you a big discount on something, it cuts out the economy and the income of those below them. And that's a big constant struggle all the time. As you know, we have a struggle right now with our cities and our legislators in Tallahassee. If they give you a giant homestead exemption, that's the source of income for the folks at the local level.
Right.
And that creates a problem. And so everybody's not on the same page. And probably it's good that it's that way. I don't know. But those are some of the issues our local businesses have. Of course, they have their bottom line to think about. And I think that what they lobby Tallahassee to do on their behalf sometimes is not in the best interest of the municipality in which they live. And that's a problem. But our schools cost money. Schools cost money to educate children. And I could never understand, and you brought it up for the life of me, why children don't write in cursive. I went to British schools, and I was thinking that they just gave a speech at FIT on the United States Constitution, the First Amendment. And I was thinking if some of our students went to the National Archives and they saw the original copy of the Declaration, they probably wouldn't be able to read it.
Right.
Because it's all in cursive, And I'm thinking they probably couldn't read this document. And to me, that was kind of sad. It hurt me, when I thought of that.
It's hard to read cursive, especially that cursive on the Constitution. They use those great big F-looking things that I think are S's, but even then, to me, in journalism, you have to write cursive when you take notes, because if you tried to print, you couldn't write fast enough to capture people's actual words.
Communication major, I get it.
And you sure can't thumb type, to keep up with that. So
of course, the kids say you don't have to write anymore. You just get on the laptop and you do everything. You don't have to write in cursive. You don't have to write in anything.
Or you have Siri just take all the notes down, right?
Guilty on that too.
Well, let's move on to an education-related topic. Florida Tech, where you spoke recently, and Eastern Florida State College seem to be booming in different ways. Eastern Florida State broke ground on a student union there, which means they're shooting for a much more on-campus experience at their Melbourne campus. Florida Tech just ranked in the top 20 or top 15 fastest-growing private colleges in America. That's pretty impressive stuff. But what do you make of that from your perspectives? Jennifer, business related, anything that portends for that?
So business related, I think it's twofold. I think you have Eastern Florida, which fills a specific demographic need. Used to be a community college, now has expanded, which some people love, some people don't. I think it's great. FIT is, big on STEM, and both of them are filling a need for workforce pipeline that we really desperately need here in the county. So that problem is across the board. You hear about it a lot in STEM, getting students interested in that. You hear about it a lot in manufacturing, that all of the people that are big into that business are retiring, and where's our workers? Where's our talented workforce? So again, a lot of people in the community that are really fighting for that, trying to get quality students to be graduating and interested in those fields. But I think both of these colleges, the fact that they're booming, is great news for us across all of our industries, because if we can do our jobs and just showing them and inviting them in and, hey, look, here's the possibilities right here in our own county, we're going to start to see a little bit of a leveling off of that problem. It's a huge thing to tackle. But I think the fact that the colleges are doing so well and are starting to boom, and we're bringing people in to our community from outside of it, and also educating the students that are from here, I think it's going to help in the long run for our businesses, because we all need quality workers, and that's a huge issue right now.
Judge Majeed, you were speaking on the First Amendment at a STEM school. What do you make of that?
Believe me, it was very well received. We had a huge turnout, and the First Amendment is very topical now. And but you raised a very interesting question. What does the Constitution have to do with commerce? Mm-hmm. And people have just written about what the secret of their economic progress in America, and almost every one of them say that one of the secret of our economic progress is the rule of law. Who would want to invest money that has no rule of law? And so the Constitution and our system of government, our system of democracy, is very critical to our capitalist society. These two things are not divorced. If you drop the First Amendment and you drop the Second Amendment, get rid of the constitutional protections, then nobody's going to be invested, because people lose the security. Security is a very critical aspect of investment and economic growth. And so capitalism is directly tied to democracy. And as democracy falls, so will capitalism. Now people say, that's a ridiculous argument. Look what's happening in China and Korea. Well, I'm not so sure it's a ridiculous argument, But anyway, presenting on the First Amendment at the FIT, the Business School, and School of Ethics went very well. I think that both of these schools are doing very well in terms of technology and the pipeline for. We have Harris, we have Lockheed Martin, etc., and we will be feeders for both of these industries. I mean, EFC is doing a really great job from a community school, involving the community, and they have kept that philosophy. I mean, many people in the community, my friend Alan Landman, Steve Sharpenter, these folks have worked really hard for this school, and it's doing fantastic. The school is doing great. Both schools are doing fantastic.
Good going out to the economy. Asked companies what do they need, and they've stood up degree programs or certificate programs to do things in healthcare. It seems like aviation, maintenance,
and certificates, like
they
Eastern Florida State
directly
College is
respond.
doing it for adults that have already graduated that need to further their career. So
I do have one fear with the STEM programs, and I don't know if you remember, in the 60s, just mid-60s, a lot of people were coming out of college with engineering degrees, couldn't find jobs. In Washington, D.C., people who leave Georgetown with engineering degrees couldn't find jobs, driving cabs, etc. And technology, like everything else, I don't know how long it will be such a sure thing. STEM would be such a sure thing. But that's the nature of economy. There are no guarantees,
Glad you brought that up. We're going to hit on that in just a moment. When we come back, a one-on-one interview with the mayor of Melbourne Beach.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
Well, thanks for joining us here on Brevard Watch. Melbourne Beach is a special place. What's some of the news that's happening there?
We just finished our budget process, and we have a nice budget that we can live with, and we've initiated our search for a town manager about a month ago, and we've narrowed it down to 6 finalists that we're scheduling interviews for. So we hope to get a new town manager on board for about maybe in a month or so, hopefully. So that's where we're at right now on those. Those are the big issues.
One of the big issues that you've talked about at a chamber event was home rule. Something that is a source of tension between the legislature and city governments. How is that issue of home rule playing out for Melbourne Beach?
Well, it constricts us in many areas. We get complaints from residents about the vacation rental next door. What are we going to do about it? Well, we can't do anything about it. State rule, state legislation prohibits us from putting any restrictions on the duration of how long somebody can rent house or an apartment or anything. Homeowners associations can regulate them, but we don't really have any homeowners association. Municipalities and counties can't. So what we're seeing is companies coming in and buying up houses that are on the market and turning them into short-term vacation rentals. And they put in a pool if it doesn't have a pool, and they rent it out to people who are on vacation. And I'm kind of torn because, you know, my wife and I, we stay in these types of places, but we're not coming down for a reunion or a party or something. And we see a lot of these houses are turned into party houses, and they're right in the middle of a neighborhood. And there's nothing we can do except enforce a noise ordinance or something like that. But we cannot say that you have to have a minimum stay of 6 months in order to rent it, or a year, or 3 months. So if they want to rent it by the night, they can rent it by the night. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people who come down on vacation, many cars in the driveway along the streets, many people around the pool late at night, and it's disturbing the residents who live there year round.
So if the state had respected this kind of tradition in Florida of home rule, meaning that the cities create the laws and the ordinances that are closest to its people, you would have that power, but we're seeing more preemption at the state level.
We had that power specifically on vacation rentals until 2011 when the state took it away. Now, there were some forward-thinking communities like Satellite Beach, like Indialantic, who had legislation in place about minimum duration of stays. And so far, the state has allowed them to continue that. They could take that away at any time, but they were grandfathered in, and had we had one, we would be grandfathered in. Now, next session, the state may say, oh, we don't mean that anymore. We're going to take that authority away from you. So it's a macro issue on many levels of home rule. You know, federalism, 3 levels of government, and each one has less control theoretically on the local residents. But the state is in a power grab right now, and has been for the last few years, to take authority away from municipalities to regulate themselves. And there have been negative statements made by state representative leadership, the Speaker of the House, proposed Speaker of the House, on how municipal government is the most corrupt government of any level. I would argue that it's probably the least corrupt and least influenced by big money contributions. And you're seeing a lot of these driven, I believe, by big money contributions. We cannot regulate shark fishing. So if you're on the beach and somebody comes up with a shark fishing rig and you're swimming and they dump their bucket of bloody grouper heads next to you, we can't do anything to inhibit that. We can't make them move down the beach. We can't send them to a different beach. We can't do anything. We can't do anything on we had a referendum that any zoning changes would require voter approval in our town. It passed with over 90% of the voters. The state took that authority away from us. So we cannot send zoning changes to the residents to vote on. We have to make a decision on that as a commission. So they preempted our authority to regulate plastic bags or styrofoam. They've preempted our authority to regulate guns in parks. You know, so they're taking these things away more and more and more and more from municipalities. Now, ironically, you see them, they can restrict guns in their meetings, but we can't restrict guns in our meetings, for instance. So a lot of the things they're putting on us, they don't put on themselves.
I just went up to the state capitol to do some work for Brevard Public Schools, and I went through the metal detectors probably 10 times,
Right.
going in and out of
Right.
out of meetings. So,
Right.
how would you size up Melbourne Beach's relations with schools in the school district?
We have a really good relationship with Gemini Elementary, which is in the town of Melbourne Beach. We actually extended our borders some years ago to include them. And unfortunately, we have a declining young population, so Gemini Elementary is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They serve the whole South Beaches, which is a mailing address of Melbourne Beach, but they're not in the town, and then they serve our kids. So we support them in their activities, and Hoover Middle School and then Mel High. We have a lot of people who want to use our parks for fundraisers and things like that, races and stuff. We recently, maybe 2 years ago, said we're going to restrict that number of people who use it. However, if it's a fundraiser for Gemini, Hoover, or Melbourne, because they are our children, we give them pretty much an open checkbook as far as using that. They just have to tell us what they're doing, and we have to make sure there's no interference. But we recognize those are our kids' schools, and so we have a special relationship with them. Mel High has a construction program that we're trying to get them to come in and do a refurbishment on our old town hall post office that they actually built for us as a shop project probably 20, 25 years ago. Hoover Middle School, I just met with the principal, Brad Merrill. He's a new principal there, and he wanted to know how can Hoover get involved in Melbourne Beach. And so we're trying to get them to march in our Christmas parade, their marching band. We're trying to get them a network with them and their students that need community service hours so that they can help some of our elderly or infirm residents who may not be able to clean up storm debris or help us keep our storm clean if they're residents during rain events, huge rain events, that the storm grates clog up with leaves and all it takes is a couple handfuls and it's running again. But it takes people to do that. So we're working with Hoover Middle School to maybe participate in some of those activities. So we have a really active and positive relationship, and we know how important they are to Melbourne Beach.
Again, my thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring not only today's educational program, but promotion of it around Brevard County. Our guests today are retired Judge A.B. Majeed and Jennifer Sugarman, President and CEO of the Cocoa Beach Regional Chamber of Commerce. Well, Judge Majeed, you mentioned the rule of law being so important in the last segment there, and let's talk about the court system a little bit. You hear people out there talking about the courts need to be more conservative, or they need to be more liberal, or they need to be more business friendly, or they need to be more plaintiff friendly. Do they need to be more of anything? Why or why not?
Listen, we have a great democracy, and the public has an absolute right to their opinion and to voice their opinion about the judiciary. But I can tell you, you can look far and wide. Our judiciary is the envy of the world. Just look at some of the steps we've taken. There was a time, not so long ago, in our lifetime, when the three of us could not sit in this room. Because of my color, the three of us could not sit in this room. There was a time when a black person could not marry a white person. There was a time when you could not sit at the same lunch counter. All these matters came before the courts, and the courts have made a ruling that's consistent with fairness and justice, with right and wrong. Courts have consistently been able to distinguish these things, and that is why we're such a viable and powerful democracy. People all over the world, you ask anybody if they got into trouble, which country they want to be tried in. It's right here in America. Look at the steps we took when Martin Luther gathered at the bridge to cross the bridge. He was waiting for an injunction. He was waiting for a rule from a court of law that says, yes, you can march. You know, he was waiting when you crossed the bridge. They had an injunction stopped them from preventing Martin Luther King. Who stood at the schoolhouse door? The governor stood at the schoolhouse door, yet the law let someone in, a black person in the schoolhouse door. So this remarkable concept of rule of law. It's the envy of the world, and it is our shining house on top of the hill, our rule of law. I am proud of this nation. I'm proud of every single judge, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished in this country because of the rule of law. Warren Buffett just wrote a long essay about the secret of his success in America. And top of his essay was, this was a nation governed by the rule of law, and that's a critical aspect of his economic success.
He probably sees plenty of sharks in the world of high finance, that's for sure. It keeps him in line. Jennifer, I know small businesses especially live in fear of lawsuits sometimes, but they also need to use the courts a lot too. What do you hear or see in terms of the courts here in Brevard County and what some of our
Well, I'll tell you in regards to your specific question about liberal, conservative, all of that in the court system, I don't, from my vantage point, I don't really think that that's as huge a role as it's being played out to be sometimes by the community. I think if we have good judges like my friend over here that are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that are following the law, the businesses reap the benefits of that, because all that the small businesses, any size business really cares about at the end of the day is security, you already hit on that, of their operations. So if the law is doing what they're supposed to do, the businesses can do what they're supposed to do and feel better about it. But yeah, small business, all the time you're having to go through contracts. A lot of times if people aren't educated, this is another side of it, on what it is that they're signing or doing or business deals and their legal rights, it can really make or break a business. So small part of what we do at the Chamber and with our friends at SCORE is counseling startup businesses on how to best do these things. So one arm of many that we do at the chamber, but for sure, I think that the courts come into play when it comes to businesses. And you really already took the words out of my mouth. It's security of operations. So
I think every time I see a big development go bankrupt or something like that, how many subcontractors who are small business people who are counting
They're
on
out.
that money coming in
They're out.
have to get in line in the court system in some form or fashion to hopefully recoup some, and then they
Yes.
really need it.
yeah.
We have to fashion a remedy so these hard-working folks who've already done the job can put bread on their table, keep a roof over their head, provide a hope and future for their children. And our task is not always very easy. It's very, very complex. But believe me, American jurisprudence is governed by the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, and it's kept our ship afloat for over 200 years. And we're not conservative, the Constitution is not conservative, or it's not Republican or Democrat, it's not blue or red. It's a magnificent document, and every day judges struggle to interpret it in the best manner possible. And we have done a remarkable job. Look at the progress we've made in our lifetime because of the courts of law.
Now, speaking of courts of law, have you seen this guy on YouTube?
He's a star.
There
in his own
are
right.
YouTube videos of Judge Majeed
One
doing.
day I want to be as famous as Judge Majeed.
You're
That's
so
my
kind.
goal
Now,
in life.
my favorite YouTube video of Judge Majeed was doing that cattle call of jail appearances that people have to do. And there was some joker who, wait, hold on, I'm going to be more impartial here. There was some defendant who had gone on some drunken rampage at his house the night before, but he was an aspiring rapper. So while he's messing up his home and pushing his girlfriend around, and he's rapping. And so what does Judge Majeed do? He decides that he's going to do a rapping in the courtroom, I believe. Who knew you could freestyle?
Do we know your rap name? Is that officially documented yet? Can you come out here on the show and give us your rap name?
DJ AB.
That's right.
It's a bad omen when men beat up women, and you can listen to this without fail. You don't raise bail, you're going to stay in jail.
Oh my gosh.
You probably don't like that beat, but I'm going to set your bond and you can have a seat. Drop the mic. Where did that come from?
Well,
You're my spirit animal.
I had a good British
This is really
education. I had a good British education, so that's about it. We studied a lot of poetry, and it comes naturally.
Do you miss dealing with people like that day in and day out?
I miss being a judge. I love being a judge. I love the challenges of being a judge, and I do miss being a judge. But I'm going to go back on the bench as a senior judge, and that means I'll sit occasionally, not all the time, and in various cases. I'll sit both as a county judge and as a circuit judge anywhere in the state of Florida, and we'll just see how that plays out. The Chief Justice has just signed an order implementing that, and I just took the oath the other day over here at the courthouse. So I'll go back to being a judge.
Well, the workload certainly is high, and they definitely need experienced judges to be able to sort through some of these issues, especially. Somebody's got to be able to take a vacation over there once in a while. So.
Yes, and then I will come in.
Jennifer, do you think that we ought to, judicial races get knocked sometimes because judge candidates can, if they put out a postcard or something, all they can really do is point to their qualifications and say, I'm impartial. Do you think that we ought to be able to ask more pointed questions or have
100%.
judges say more revealing things about themselves in campaigns?
I think anyone that's going for any kind of public position should be able to give more information, and that's a hard thing to do. I think that when you just look at our political races, you couldn't pay me enough to do any of these roles, so stop asking, because I'm not kidding. I mean, county commission and court especially. I mean, just the right or wrong, the decisions you have to make every single day, the judgments that you're going to get based on those decisions. I mean, that's a tough gig,
Right.
and not everyone has that thick skin to be able to do it. But you certainly, if you're going for it, you have to be able to open yourself up, not only to scrutiny, but to what it is that you're going to bring to the table. So 100%, I think that.
Okay, so we can. So if we ask those pointed questions, what do you think, Judge? Do you think that candidates should ought to answer those?
Let's think it through for a while. I mean, when you ask me a pointed question, what are you really asking me? And which is why we give the answer that we give. You're asking me, how would I rule on a matter when I have not even heard the facts?
Right.
How would you like a judge who already has a decision in his pocket before he's even heard a case? So when you ask me, what do I think about abortion? Okay, I mean, what answer can I give you? I would have to hear the
There's
case
always
that
a
comes
bias.
before me. I would have to hear the facts and then make a ruling. You don't want a judge who has a decision before he's even heard the facts. Critical part of our aspect of our judiciary is you have to have direct examination and cross-examination of the witness. And that's how you get to the truth. And if we haven't had any of that, and I already have an opinion, why would you want to vote for me? I mean, I am absolutely unqualified to be a judge if I have an opinion. Hey, what do you think about gun control? What do you think about abortion? What do you think about the death penalty? Well, some cases might justify it, and some cases it might not be justified based on the facts and the law. I have to make a ruling consistent with the facts and the law, and I can't make a ruling before I've heard the facts. And so when you ask me my opinion and I don't give it to you, you say, that's the guy I want, because he's not coming already, his gun is not cocked and he's ready to fire when you follow what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's think it through. You want a judge who does not have a pre-planned opinion, who comes in ready to listen and make a decision only after he or she has heard. That's why it's very critical. A judge cannot say, oh, I have a policy of not sending any DUI person to jail. Well, if you have a policy, then the facts, you cannot be persuaded by the facts.
So no matter who you are, whether you're an insurance company, you're a little guy, you're a criminal defendant, you want to know that you're going to get a fair shake.
Exactly. You come and say, hey, the judge has a blank slate, and I'm going to get a fair shake, because what? You want a judge who would listen to you, who would look at you, who would respect you, and having heard what you have to say, then how would you like for your dad to give you a whooping without even hearing what you have to say? You don't want that.
Because he has a
That
policy of
happens every
whooping.
day.
Yeah.
That happens every day
Yeah.
in our country.
Let's shift gears a little bit on a topic that, again, has its connections to business. It also has its connection to public trust and the law. Brevard Public Schools was lucky enough to have voters approve a sales surtax 2014 to repair and renew school buildings they had leaky roofs, the AC systems were breaking down. As of now, it appears that Brevard Public Schools is on track to spend all that money just exactly as it was said it was going to on the projects it said it was going to, and yet in a conservative county like Brevard, people remain very, very skeptical of that, of the school district, and of the spending. And my question is, what does it take on an issue like that to maintain public trust in the future?
Listen, public trust is a very, very critical aspect in the schools and in the judiciary. If people have no confidence, it's like buying stocks. If you don't have confidence in the stock, you're not going to buy it. It's no different from every other aspect of public life. If you don't have confidence in the judiciary, you're not going to come to court. And so I think that as conservative as we are, as much as we're against taxation, people were not so concerned about paying the half a penny tax as much as we don't think the school board is proper repositories of our money. They are very careless how they spend our money, and they want an accountability for how the money is spent and why you cannot balance your budget with the money you have. And I think that's people's question, the spending part of it as opposed to raising the income. But you know, the thing that got me with the half a penny tax was the first go around. After they announced that they're going to close 2 schools, I mean, a majority of the people in those communities, and that shows you, you and I talked earlier about thinking about the whole, thinking about the benefit of all. A majority of those people whose 2 schools were going to be closed publicly stated, if I knew it would affect my school, I would have voted for it. Now, how about that for being really selfish? But I think I have faith in this community, and I think people would, and they did step up to the plate eventually with the half a penny tax. The question is, how are you going to spend this? How do we have confidence that you're going to spend it properly for the reason that it's, because, you know, we were very, very duped when they said, let's have a lottery system. It's going to go to schools. Well, it doesn't go to schools. And so we were burnt once, real big. And so you can understand some hesitancy about this.
The lottery comes up a lot. The lottery does come up a lot, regardless of whether Brevard Public Schools manages the lottery money. People want to know, that was my money, where did it go? Jennifer, what do you hear from business people?
So I think it's 2 things, specifically answering your question, and that's visibility and education. That's a lot of what we do at the chamber, whether it's on a controversial topic or not. It's just educating the public, the business community on what exactly you're spending the money on. So when you did the first go around, the second go around, I feel like the second go around, we had a lot more people out in the community doing a lot more presentations, drawing the lines, connecting it specifically to here's round one, here's what we're going to spend it on, here's our schools in need, here's what your half a cent is really going for. And I think now that it's happened and the people have passed it, that's great, but it's the follow-up, it's the follow-through, it's the marketing and everyone else going out into the community, to the chambers, to the business community, speaking at a luncheon, speaking at a breakfast, and saying this is exactly what it is that we are using the money for. This is how much has been completed, and this is the next phase. I think being visible in the community and making sure that you're educating the community on exactly where everything's going, while it seems like a small thing in a large pond of trying to turn people's heads and go a certain direction, same thought process that you're on, it helps being out there. So that's my two things I think would be visibility and education.
So it's the transparency.
Right.
And just the information on this is what we said we were going to spend money on.
Right.
This is where we have spent the money.
Right.
Matters as much as the amount that is collected from the sales tax.
Exactly. And a lot of people in the community, they don't know what they don't know, So you have to tell them, just like you did when you were trying to get support for the half-cent sales tax. You have to come out and you have to tell them what it is, what's the problem, here's our solution, and here's exactly how we're going to use it.
Yes, people want to see some transparency, some accountability for the money that you've asked them to come up with. And listen, we live in the most generous nation in the world. When there's any disaster anywhere in the world, anywhere, people we don't know, people we never heard of, we are the first to respond. And it's no different in our community. We Americans are very, very generous people. And half a penny is no great burden. But the question is, they want some accountability. They want some transparency and see how their money is being spent. I mean, listen, we're the first to respond with food, blanket, water, anywhere in the world. So a half a penny is not, I don't think that's a problem with our community. We have very generous, kind-hearted people. Look how much money we raise outside of the school system. Every Christmas, every kid in Brevard County gets a gift. So they just want to make sure that our money is being spent the way you told us you're going to spend it, and you don't waste it. You don't throw it into St. John's River.
So conservative doesn't mean stingy. It just means skeptical of bureaucracy, and they want to know where their dollars are going.
And then now that the trial that's going on in Seminole County with the clerk of court, this is the kind of thing that leaves a very sour taste in the mouths of the public. Hey, look what's happened to our money. Mm-hmm. And right here now in the school district, we're changing our computer system, right? I mean, that's a whole bunch of money there.
Right.
So these are the kind of things that people have questions for and that make them hesitant, but doesn't mean they're stingy.
Well, and there's a challenge too when you say the word tax. That's a dirty word. I mean, I feel a lot of what I've heard, at least from the community, is that there's a lot of, well, let's just solve it with the tax, and now we're trying to clean up the lagoon. We're doing this. We're trying to turn to roads next.
Right.
And really, one of the only solutions that gets thrown out there is, well, let's add a tax, and people are kind of trying to take a step back and be like, wait a minute, we just did schools, we just did lagoon, we're doing this, we're doing that. How can we use what we have and realign things so that we can get to where we want to go? So it's interesting.
Talk about that a little bit more in a moment. When we come back, do Brevard County taxpayers really have to choose between roads and parks?
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
Okay, one of the big issues, and we touched on this a little bit in the last segment, is the priorities and the choices that you have to make within a given amount of revenue for a government. But we're stuck in this situation at the county government level, not so much with cities, where you have county commissioners talking about whether they need to close parks in order to fund roads. We're fixing the lagoon. That seems to be doing pretty well. But should we have to choose one over the other? I mean, what is the best approach in your view? Let's start with Judge Majeed.
Well, whatever we do, whether it's our simple economy at home, we always have to have some priorities in our spendings. But I really don't feel that you're in this community. I don't know exactly what the numbers are for the county budget, but for the longest time we've existed with all these amenities being paid for, public parks, roads, etc. And now suddenly we have to choose one over the other. When the county commissioners have more money than they've ever had in the history of the county commission. Now we cannot sustain the services that we once had with a whole lot less money, a whole smaller budget. We cannot sustain the very services. And so you can understand the people questioning this. This is a legitimate inquiry from the people. I mean, the county commission now has the biggest budget than it's ever had in its history.
Jennifer, does it feel like we are actually at risk with some of the basic infrastructure that we need for our economy and business growth?
I don't think you're always at risk, right? If you're always trying to grow as a community of losing things, of doing certain things. To your question, I would like to think that there's a way that you don't have to cut one to boost another. It's not a perfect world. It's not a perfect county. It goes back to that whole you couldn't pay me enough to be a commissioner thing. But I think when you look at it from my personal perspective, you have to look at, if you're sitting in that commission seat, what's going to get you the greatest return on investment. So if you're investing in, I'll keep going back to it just because it's my background, economic development or something else, you bring a company here that brings in more infrastructure that has these demands, is that going to then trickle down and help us build up our parks? Is it going to help us build up our roads? It might. So you have to look at it from a perspective of what is the biggest return for the investment right now today. I hear what you're saying about we have more money than we've had and we should be able to figure this out, and we should, but I can't see everything that they're seeing. I don't pretend that I know, what other experts in those fields know, but I do know that there's a lot of ideas out there on how to fix these issues, and if we could all just come together and listen, I think we might be able to do it.
Some of them are tough.
They're very tough.
I mean, they're questioning whether we should have these redevelopment agencies in cities. Right. North Brevard Economic Zone has been very focused on business growth and recovery in North Brevard, but then you also have really nice things like downtown Melbourne that is wonderful. I love downtown Melbourne, but now you have county commissioners saying, well, are these redevelopment agencies sequestering dollars for nice things?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, too, on CRAs and different things. We just had Courtney Barker a few months back. It's probably been more than a few months, my brain. Talk about CRAs at our Government Affairs Committee meeting at the Chamber. And I was personally blown away on what I didn't know. Even in my position of being around businesses and municipalities, there's so much that you hear that can't always be taken at face value. You really have to have an expert come in and explain to you what it is that's going on for you to fully grasp the situation. And I think a lot of times when you're in such a large community with so many different opinions, we kind of lose sight of that. Whereas if you hear something, okay, what did I really just hear? Who do I need to ask to really get the straight facts and then be able to make an educated decision on it?
Listen, we really need people in government who can manage money. We cannot consistently be on a subsistence level. We pay just for the services we have, and I don't even pay for the services we need without thinking about the future, planning for the future. Now, we have an issue with cocoa water and infrastructure. Now, what happens if, God forbid, we have something like Flint, Michigan? What's going to happen? Where are we going to get the money from to fight this problem? And so not only do we have to pay for the services we have to manage the budget so we have some reserves. We know what some future problems are. I just spoke to someone who lives on the river, and the entire place is totally polluted with feces, etc. What happened, God forbid, if we have something like Houston? And so if we have no reserves, we can't pay for the services now, and we have no reserves, how are we going to deal with these terrible disasters? And I think these are the questions the public have. And these are legitimate inquiry and question for those who manage our lives. I don't see anything improper about these questions. And so it's one thing to say that we have more money now. Yes, I understand that. And of course, things don't cost the same as they did. So we have to consider that factor. But, we can't have a county commission that's conservative, two conservatives and liberals, and there's the fighting between the governing forces. Somebody has to say, listen, we have been elected to govern Brevard County. Can we just put our heads together and work for the benefit of Brevard County? But, of course, that's a fool's paradise. Is it going to happen? I doubt it.
I'm just struck by in Brevard County how some cities just move right ahead and solve their problems,
Yes.
and some don't. And then you have another government in county government that has a tax revenue cap that it has to contend with. So places like Vieira, Merritt Island, South Melbourne beaches that are unincorporated have a completely different set of issues. Satellite Beach, they had roads that needed to be replaced. The city council just decided this is what we're going to set our tax rate at. Next thing you know, boom, all the roads were repaved.
Yes,
And the
yes.
people in Vieira at the county government level were still complaining, how are we going to fix our roads? They just didn't have the same options available to them, I guess, to get it done.
Yes, a lot of municipalities are taking things in hand. They have their priorities, and they do get it. And I live in West Melbourne, and I can tell it's a very well-managed city.
West Melbourne is booming. West Melbourne seemed to almost not have a recession there. They just did very, very well. Before we go any further, I want to give you a chance to break news, both of you. What's new in your world? What have you got going on?
New in our world. So believe it or not, the Chamber of Commerce is turning 50. So into 2018, we're going to be, Cocoa Beach Regional Chamber of Commerce turns 50, and we're going to have a big celebration at our gala on January 26th and just take a look back at all of our history and all that's changed and really where we're going as a chamber. So it's very exciting. That's our big news, is we're about to have a huge anniversary, and we hope you'll come and see us at many of our networking events and seminars and educational opportunities. Get involved, whether it's for our active duty military men and women. For space, we have our Citizens for Space Exploration movement that's housed in our chamber. We have so many different things you can get involved in. I could keep you busy every night of the week, and I am. So come on out and see us.
So this week I learned about chambers that the borders for Chamber of Commerce areas tend to be a little bit fluid or non-existent. Went to an event at your offices in Vieira, then went to another event by the Melbourne Area Chamber of Commerce
In
Vieira.
Right.
So explain.
So there's been, I guess when we first incorporated in 1968 and Vieira was really first coming on the map and getting bigger and bigger, there was a little bit of, in my mind, an antiquated territory battle for chambers and businesses. So here's how I look at it, and I hope my counterparts also look at it that way. We get together regularly. I think we feel the same way. We're on the same board. I know Melbourne's about to get a new CEO, and I hope that this relationship continues. But it is about what the business wants to get out of the chamber, not about where the chamber is or what the chamber wants to do for that business. We're here for hire. A chamber of commerce should be for hire by the local business and what they want to get out of it. So if you want to go and be a part of a really strong veterans group, by all means, absolutely go to the Melbourne Chamber because they have a veteran focus group. If you'd like to be more involved in active duty, come to the Cocoa Beach Chamber. We have a very involved military affairs council. We have meetings on base and off of base. We get reports. So it's just different styles. It's not that one doesn't care about active duty over veterans. That's not it. It's about what you want to get out of that chamber. We tend to be a little more hospitality tourism based because in Cocoa Beach, we collect a lot of the tourism tax and we have a lot of big hotels and restaurants. Whereas, we don't have Northrop Grumman sitting in our backyard. We don't have the Melbourne Airport in our backyard, but we do have a port. So again, it just depends on what the business is, who their audience is. So if you're, so I'll use a family example. If you're selling video games, you're probably going to want to catch the tourists off the cruise ship and the business community in Melbourne and Merritt Island and up north and down south. So it just depends on what it is that you want to get out of the chamber. I personally don't believe in territories. I think that all of the chambers are great. And I believe in chambers. So no matter which one it is, I just hope that the business will join one.
So we also have them in Titusville and Palm Bay
Yes.
that focus on their communities.
Yes.
But also,
It's unique, when I do my traveling and I go to my different events, we're a unique county because we are so long and we're huge, so we have 4 chambers of commerce and most places only have 1. So it's a unique environment that all of us are in, really. But I feel that it should be about what you want to get out of the chamber, not a territory line.
Did I hear some talk some time ago about merging all the chambers and have one Brevard County Chamber?
There's always a talk about that. I think it would be great, personally, and
so
my
you
executive
will favor
committee
such an
knows
idea.
that. I think it would be great. It'd be great for the community. There's a lot of, like I just mentioned, history with each chamber, so they all have deep roots in what it is that the business communities that they're serving. And so a lot of politics comes into play, which is probably my least favorite part of the role. But I think chamber life is great. I think a business being a part of a chamber is important. And so Whether they merge eventually or not, there's always talk of that. There's been talk of that since before I was born, I think. But whether it happens and how quickly it happens, that's another story.
Matt, I've heard some talk about Viera maybe should be its own municipality, its own mayor, etc. What do you think? You think that's a viable idea? I think that Viera is becoming such a powerful community that maybe it ought to be its own municipality.
I think that those kinds of conversions that I've heard about and watched in other parts of the country tend to happen once the developer is done there, and some of that developer-created governance, for lack of a better word, moves on. And then you have the people there who look around, and really the only people that are there to represent them are their county commissioners. Merritt Island would be a better example to me of a place that conversation happens all the time. They have found their structures in other ways. They have one county commissioner who sort of is the mayor of Merritt Island, so to speak, but their schools wind up being their community centers in some fashions, or homeowners associations. Someday, I'll bet you that Merritt Island will become a city, and I think Viera might do that as well. It just has so much going on that it might want more representation, and it might want more control over its own destiny than it might if left as an unincorporated area. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're right. In due course, once the developer leaves, there's a little vacuum, and then they look for a way to fill that vacuum, and then kind of a self-governance, and that's what happens.
So why were you at a chamber meeting today? What's going on with Judge Majeed, and what's your news?
Well, nothing is going on with me. I've been very active in the community, from the very beginning, and I would like to get back into elective office again at some point in the future. And I'm looking at possibilities for 2020. A number of seats are available. And I've actually sat down with the state attorney, Phil Archer, who's a wonderful, wonderful person, a person whom I respect immensely, because I've heard some talk that he might not run or seek re-election. And when we talked about it, he was not very firm that he, in fact, would seek re-election, and he was not firm that he would not seek re-election. But that's a seat I'll be very, very interested in. I feel I'm very qualified for the seat. I'll be a good fit for that seat. And should he not seek re-election, I would like to run for that seat. I feel that I'm a good public servant, and I'll be able to serve the people well. I would appeal to all aspects of this community, and justice and fairness is in my blood.
That's some real political news there.
I was going to
say,
I
know when I hear it.
Blew my news out of the water.
That's something I would like to do, but 2020 is a ways away, and I have a family. I take care of my family, and so I also know that life's very unpredictable, and who knows what will happen between now and 2020. But whatever happens, I'm very happy to be a citizen of Brevard County. I'm very happy to be a citizen of the United States of America. And right now, we have a lot of talk about the flag, and people respecting or disrespecting the flag. So I would like to take a second to comment about my personal view about the flag.
Okay.
Every day that I wake up, I thank the Lord for waking up under the American flag, because I have more liberties and freedom than I've ever dreamed of. I've seen the other side of the mountain, and believe me, I'm proud to be an American. And Grandma always taught me one thing: there's a time and place for everything. And I don't think that there's the time or place for me to exercise my First Amendment right is when the flag is being flown or when the anthem is being sung. And, as a judge, I have no First Amendment right. I cannot go where I wish. I cannot speak as I wish. And that's something I agreed to when I took on the job. But for me, when Grandma says there's a time and place for everything, I will repeat again. I don't think that the playing of the national anthem or the flying of the American flag is a time for me to exercise my First Amendment right.
I have to leave it there. I want to thank you both for being in the studio with me here today. Thanks for coming on Brevard Watch.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that's our program. My thanks to Community Credit Union for making this episode of Brevard Watch possible. And thanks again to our guests, retired Judge A.B. Majeed and Jennifer Sugarman, President and CEO of the Cocoa Beach Regional Chamber of Commerce. Our producer, editor, and drone pilot is Mike Francisco. I'm Matt Reed. We'll see you next week on BPS TV, YouTube, and right in your newsfeed on Facebook.